Thank you so much for clicking on my video. And if you're returning, welcome back to my channel. Today, we are going to conclude our reading of Spare. We are at chapter 71 through the epilogue in part 3. So let's get into it. Once again, thank you so much for clicking on my video. If you have not already, feel free to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell. I want to say a big hello to all of my members, and thank you so much for supporting the channel, and I'm going to curtsy. The channel, and I'm going to curtsy to the royal court. Thank you so much for all that you do. So if you have not read to this point in the book, this is part 3, chapter 71 through the epilogue, and you have not gotten to this point and you don't want anything spoiled, click out and come back once you've gotten to this point. We pick up in this part of the book with the 2019 Well Child Awards, and this is when Prince Harry was presenting an award, and out of the corner of his eye, he catches a glimpse of Meghan, and he immediately goes back to when they found out they were pregnant. He is like mentally in that space, and from this place of being extremely gracious, he is also extremely sympathetic, and he knows how, as a new parent, all you want for your child to be safe and healthy and happy. And he looks out at all of these warriors and their different battles and their struggles and how they are championing their existence, and they're just pushing through no matter what the challenges are. And he chokes up at the thought of not only these parents having to go through this, because he can now relate, but these children who are sick. And he chokes up.
I remember.
Not only that, but a friend of his mother's is next to him presenting, and while he's presenting, and she puts her arm on him and just her hand on him and kind of rubs his back a little bit, and it helps him to kind of regroup and complete his speech. Now, I'm gonna come back to that moment because it's like a lot of other moments in the book, and I kind of found this little thread of commonality between these what seem to be small moments, and then we get confirmation at the end of the book. Wait for me on that one. So, finishes his speech, and he gets a text message from William, who saw the clip of him choking up at the Well Child Awards, and he's now showing a lot of concern. And he tells Harry, I'm here for you if you need anything. You don't look well. I'm concerned about you, and I'm really worried. He also alludes to the fact that Harry needs help. And Harry reminds us that he has been getting help. He's in therapy. He also said the same thing to William. And he reminds the reader that at one point, William accused his therapist of brainwashing Harry. And although he said he wanted to attend a session, Harry invited him. William never showed up. And I thought that was really interesting that he accused Harry of being brainwashed, because it might look similar to brainwashing when you're actually undoing a lifetime of brainwashing. It could look just very sporadic, like this is out of left field. Who are you? You're a whole different person. And yeah, kind of you are when you start to wake up and you start to gain consciousness to the reality of your actual life, and you stop buying into the delusions that everything's okay and what we do here is totally normal. When you start to wake up, yeah, in a way, he was undoing the brainwashing that had been done to him his entire life. And I thought that was an interesting comment to make from William, who benefits greatly from Harry remaining in that brainwashed state, from him remaining just fully committed 24/7 to his family and being willing to take anything and everything because that's his job. He was born to be the backup and essentially to be the punching bag and the scapegoat. And when a scapegoat wakes up and they see the world for what it is and they see their place in the dynamics of their family and they're like, oh no, I'm not doing this anymore, it can look like brainwashing because you're no longer allowing yourself to be brainwashed. And it's interesting how they just kind of fall into these very well documented patterns of behavior based on their roles, as well as this evolution that Harry's going through and how it kind of spawns all these different reactions from his family, who again benefit from him being the scapegoat of the family by taking no matter what, gaining very little and being compliant. William is becoming very angry. And it's apparent that when he can't convince Harry what to do, he gets very frustrated, and he reacts to that frustration through just outward bullying, lashing out, yelling, abusive behavior. Very, very toxic. And it's interesting that someone choking up at the thought of sick children would require someone to think that they were concerned about them or you're not well. I would say if the thought of sick children doesn't put you off in any way, it doesn't make you feel anything, and it doesn't connect with anything in your spirit, something might be wrong with you. I would wonder if maybe you have no emotions or possibly a sociopath. Like, why can't you connect to the emotions, especially when it comes to something so drastic? So I thought that was a very interesting thing to kind of turn the tables on Harry. Something's wrong with you because you care about sick children. I don't think that's how that works. Harry realizes that his worst fear is coming true. Now that he's becoming more independent, he's becoming more aware, he no longer connects to his brother. And I think that's a huge red flag and a great note to point out that the more you become independent and the better you take care of yourself, other people can't stand it. Then I would venture to say those people don't belong in your life until they're able to see you as a whole and a real person. This exchange turned into a 72-hour argument. There's just not that much to be mad about, especially from William's perspective. I guess I don't understand how William doesn't see what Harry is saying when William is also experiencing the same thing. And that tells me one of two things. Either William is extremely daft or, two things can be true. But the other option could be he knows full well what Harry is saying. He just wants Harry to be compliant. All this arguing isn't so that he can understand Harry. It's so that he can bully Harry back into submission. All these conversations, the reason they're probably so frustrating to Harry is because he's speaking logically. But when people are being abusive, they're doing that from an illogical place. Anybody with a heart and a soul and any type of character doesn't partake in abuse. So when you are partaking in this toxic cycle and you are enjoying the fruits of your labor in that role, and you are benefiting greatly from someone else taking the brunt of things, you don't want that dynamic to change. I think William was fully aware of how the dynamic shifted when Harry left, that he is now at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to the three families. When it comes to the monarch, at that point, it was the Queen, and then it was Charles and Camilla, and then it was William and Kate, and then it was Harry and Meghan. So when Harry and Meghan leave, there's a new scapegoat. And we see that play out. As I learned about scapegoats, one of the things I learned was that they are often subject to enablers trying to convince them to re-enter the toxic cycle for a number of reasons. One, there's a comfort in the way things are and just keeping things the same. And as an enabler, you're likely not taking the brunt of the abuse. So it benefits you for people to stay where they are because the brunt of the abuse might switch to you if that key player is gone. So if there's an abuser in a dynamic, they have multiple enablers, and then they have the scapegoat, and sometimes like a golden child, and they have this scapegoat. And if the scapegoat leaves, the abuser doesn't just change, they switch targets. And what the enablers do, whether consciously or subconsciously, they will try and keep you where you are and keep you complacent so that you don't leave. That way, at least for the moment, I'm good. And that's not right. Some people don't realize they're doing it, but they very much are. And so that's what it feels like with William.
When the scapegoat says no more and walks away from the abuse, the abusers are left with their world in complete disorder. Sometimes the new scapegoat reaches out to the old scapegoat to convince them to return to the narcissistic family, just so they can be spared. For the narcissistic family, no one or nothing is above the family unit. Family must stay together no matter how miserable everyone is.
Harry and Meghan decide they need a little break, and they go and stay at a friend's house in Vancouver that is only accessible by plane or by a ferry. And they describe this time as being very magical, just being very peaceful. They've got the sea, they've got the forest, they're secluded in some way, and the people in the nearby village give them their space. They're not like enamored with celebrity, but more so they're very considerate people. They recognize that Harry and Meghan are kind of going through some things, and they don't pull their phones out, they don't record them, they don't follow them, they don't do any of that stuff. They're just not interested in it. So while they were there, they got an opportunity to really enjoy their peace, but they lasted exactly 6 weeks, which seems to be the cycle for the Daily Mail. It's so uncanny. But it lasted 6 weeks, and then they were ambushed by paparazzi. They were being followed into the town. At one point, their route to the village, the nearby village, had 40 paparazzi on it, and their favorite general store had a sign that said no media. They just kind of disrupted the peace in the town trying to find Harry and Meghan, and when they found them, they disrupted their peace as well. It's very sad that they could only think about their bottom line and the money that they make from having this kind of access to Harry and Meghan, and they just don't see them as humane people. It's more so like zoos. It's like they're looking at them and there's this spectacle, but they don't see them as real people who deserve some sort of quality of life. It's just like, you exist in order to stay in front of my lens. So there was this one paparazzi that Harry, he said he'd been following him around for a long time. And so he come to recognize him. But this guy, once their location was published, this guy is like almost looking for a way in to his fence and like trying to figure out how to get on the property. And he's just pacing back and forth. And that was scary. But the way Harry describes him, this is what makes me laugh throughout this entire book, even in somewhat serious moments. He's very witty. And so he is reading this paparazzi's clothes down.
Well, I think there's hope. I hope you don't wear this outfit again. If you have to guess what an outfit is, it's not a good one.
Okay. There's not some style to that right
No,
there?
he just caught something earlier today.
You don't have to be lonely at Farmer's Own.
Come on, man. He looks like a damn idiot in that outfit.
He talked about this man's demeanor, his shoes, his job. Like, he just went in on this man. And for a second, I'm just like, okay, now the book turns into a roast. But it was very funny. Harry and Meghan are like, look, we have gotten a good little taste of freedom. We are enjoying our life. We can smell the fresh air. We're not living in a crypt or next to or adjacent to. Like, it's just peaceful. People aren't invading our privacy. Like, I want that moment back. And so they start to just kind of have their wheels turning. Like, we need to figure something out. We just can't go back into that fishbowl in the way that we were in there. That's just not right. And so Harry runs this by the Queen, and he tells her, you know, we would like to live maybe separate from the family and still work on your behalf and everything stay the same, but we just wouldn't live in the fishbowl. And she even signed off on it. So when he asked Charles how he felt about it, Charles asked him to write down his plans. And so Harry is just kind of like, well, the last time that happened, everything I wrote down got published and it was leaked. And so I want to avoid leaks. I don't really want to write anything down. And Charles is just like, well, I'm sorry, I can't push it through government if you don't write things down. And he really stonewalls Harry into kind of doing what he says, even though Harry's like, then fix the leaks and then I will pour into your bowl if you fix the leaks. But Charles is not budging. So Harry sends a letter. It's watermarked. And he includes key details that are not present anywhere else, only in this letter. The key detail is that he and Meghan are offering, if necessary, to relinquish their titles that were granted to them by the Queen. And so he sends this watermarked, private, and it's all over it is saying, you know, confidential, private, and it goes directly to Charles. Charles tells him, come back home immediately so that we can discuss this. But when Harry says, I'm coming back home to see Granny, so great, we can talk about it then. He's like, oh, but wait, I'll be in Scotland till the end of the month. Then why was it? I just feel like I don't understand Charles, but then after hearing the comments from the Queen, it made a little bit more sense. So Harry reminds Charles that it is imperative that this document remain private, and he hopes that there is nothing leaked. Here's the thing, Charles doesn't like assuage him in any way. He just says, well, you realize that you'll be disobeying orders from the monarch and myself if you persist in this course of action without having a sit down to talk about it. He doesn't say like, hey, I agree, I'm going to do all I can to keep it confidential, or hey, I got that little problem fixed, had a conversation. Like, he doesn't confirm that he values the privacy. He just tells him, regardless of that, you need to sit down and talk to us or you're disobedient. It's very clear that he's being evasive. Something is not right. So now Harry begins this conversation with the Queen. He tells her that he is coming home and that he wants to talk to her about these alternate living arrangements. He tells her what his plan is, or what he has concocted so far. And although the Queen is not pleased, she does not want her grandbaby and his family to live away from her. She does understand. And she also anticipated this coming because she could see what was on the horizon. She'd also witnessed all the abuse that was going on. So she invited him and Meghan to stay at Sandringham with her while they were on their visit. So that shows some sort, in my opinion, an alliance, an alignment. She's, in some way, this was a message to me that although this other stuff is going on, we're still family and I want to see you. And that felt very genuine. She even at that time, this is important to note, checked her diary before she extended that invitation, and it was clear for the whole week. He asked if he planned to see Charles at the same time. And Harry repeats what Charles told him and said, no, I won't be able to see him because when I asked if we could meet up, he told me he'd be in Scotland until the end of the month. The Queen has had it with Charles. Like, she's over his antics, and she let out a very long sigh and she said, I only have one thing to say about that. Your father always does what he wants to do. So they hop a plane, they head out to Sandringham, and when they touch down, the Bee has reached out to their secretary and canceled the meeting with Queen Elizabeth, stating she had a full diary and she wouldn't have any time to meet with him. So Harry's like, what the hell? We just talked, so I'll reach out to her. So he calls his granny back and he asks her like, oh, I thought I must have misunderstood. I thought that you invited me to stay at Sandringham this week. And she was like, I didn't realize I had a full diary according to the Bee. And he realizes that she's speaking kind of oddly. It almost is like she's being monitored. And so he goes, is he with you now, Granny? And she doesn't reply. So it seems like they're suppressing that communication in some way. And I wonder if Queen Elizabeth recognized to the extent that they were like monitoring that relationship and maybe diverting Harry from getting in touch with her directly. And how many times has that happened? Because again, throughout this book, we're seeing Harry peel back the layers of consciousness and he's starting to recognize just how foul his family moves, especially when it comes to him. And so my question is, he noticed it this time after doing a lot of work and doing a lot of realizing and really building up his consciousness on this matter. I wonder how many other things like that have happened that he just didn't recognize, or he just took at face value and it didn't spawn any kind of question because he wasn't to the place that he's at now. And all these questions are popping up in my mind. They head out. And here's what's so funny is when Harry's in the car, he takes us down the road to his little 007 fantasy where he wants to just bum rush Sandringham and is like, let me see my granny right now. And I told you, Harry, sometimes you just got to throw some bows and clear the room and get to your grandmama. I'm telling you, at least once in every person's life, they need to fight everybody in one room and get to their granny. I can assure you it's totally normal, not toxic at all. Clear that the Queen was not at liberty to speak freely with him, so he dropped the matter. It's then that they notice that the son has a lot of the details about the offer that Harry wrote down and sent over to Charles. Again, a shockingly small number of people have access to this document because it was sent only to Charles. There were no copies. It's watermarked and it's supposed to be in a very secure place on his desk. So the showbiz editor from The Sun, who was a lead reporter, and he had refashioned his whole persona, his public persona, to be a royal correspondent because he's the friend of one of William's staff members. Say that 5 times fast. So he's been being fed gossip and lies about the royal family, and he's using his in to basically build a career. And so he is attempting to break the story that Harry and Meghan are going to step away. And they tried to get ahead of the story. They got feedback from the Queen that she would allow them to break their own news publicly, but it just did not need to add to speculation, and it needed very calm wording. And the Queen is all about that. She does not like mess, or she don't like mess publicly. So they couldn't get the right statement. They just kind of kept second guessing themselves. They were kind of working on the fly. They are on this impossible timeline because they had no way to prepare for this leaking. Again, Harry thought it was very private. And again, it contains that information that only Charles had access to. Here's the weird part is it appears that the son is working in tandem with the palace. And the reason that it could be is because they want to spin the story before Harry and Meghan get a chance to speak the truth. And so they try, but they give up. And so, as Harry says, they open a bottle of wine, and Harry says, proceed, sad little man, proceed. He gonna get in his jabs, okay? And you know what? This is the kind of memoir I want. I want honesty. I want details. I want you to tell me that you hated somebody's guts. I want you to tell me that somebody's shirt had a hole in it. I want you to tell me that they smelled like poop. I want you to give me the details. I don't want you to be politically correct in your memoir. And Harry delivered. I love that he was like, sad little man with your broke ass. So anyway, the story drops. As expected, it's inaccurate, filled with lies. Their offer to departure in this very callous manner. But again, it also included that one little detail that only Charles and a shockingly small number of people should have had access to. I'm not going to beat around the bush. The same person that was leaking this entire time is Charles's wife. She would likely have access to his office, and she was probably the one who leaked it. Just again, I would have loved for the Queen and her staff to stop focusing so much on Harry and Meghan and putting them in their place. And I would have loved for them, their whole family, to unite against Camilla and be like, this is not how we do things. Like, they have so much to say about Meghan's wardrobe, about her hair, about not wearing a hat, even about Kate and all these, and even about William. They have something to say about everybody else, but they're not saying something to the person who is just committing what I feel like is treason. Like, at this, how do you enter a family and just destroy it? But the family itself has to be compliant in some way. And the family that was compliant was Charles. He was protecting her. So, which I don't understand. I keep getting messages of people being like, well, Charles really loves Camilla and he never wanted to be a dad. And so that's why he acts that way. Again, just because we know the why doesn't permit the act. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. People may be in love and hurt people. It doesn't mean they have the right to hurt people. That's why I don't like rom-coms where they have to cheat in order to be together, because it makes me lose the fun and the fantasy. If you can't just be together, you got to be star-crossed. Or if you can be star-crossed, that's one thing. But to cheat on people or to commit these grievous acts in order to come together as one, then y'all weren't meant to be. Y'all forcing it, because people shouldn't be left in your wake when you want to find love. Like, that's just not, you shouldn't have a trail of bodies because you want to get to each other. That just doesn't make any sense. And Charles and Camilla definitely have a trail of bodies. But let's proceed. So Harry and Meghan hunker down at Buckingham Palace in the stateroom, and they're trying to release the statement. They work all day, and two senior staff and Harry and Meghan are just hunkered down in the stateroom working on this statement. They finally get it together, but while he's walking us through this process of them just kind of being like fugitives within Buckingham Palace, it is actually really sad, because he is reflecting, and it's like, now that he knows he's leaving, it's like a new layer of vision has opened up, and he can see like the palace for the first time. He's just so used to seeing the palace, but now that he knows he's leaving and he's looking around, he's like cherishing everything he sees, like all these happy memories and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? I get it. It doesn't mean that he wants to go back. I saw people being like, Harry, it's less important to retain memories as it is to protect your wife. Listen, I get what people are trying to say. Like, don't romanticize something just because you're going to miss it and then you allow something bad to happen. I get what they were trying to say, but those two things aren't the same. Just because he misses something and he's seeing it and appreciating it for what it is, it doesn't mean that the fact that he had to leave to protect his wife is not a tragedy. It is a tragedy. He should have been allowed to stay amongst his family and do what he was born to do, which is serve his country. His wife should have been allowed to serve his country. Their children should have been able to grow up in the fold, and they should have been kept safe, protected, and treated just as well as everyone else. That just wasn't the reality. It doesn't mean it's not a tragedy that he had to leave. So I think people coming down on Harry for being extremely nostalgic in this section, I think they are being a little bit short-sighted, because who's not going to miss things that made them happy? Even if the reason you're separating from them are valid, you can have valid reasons for leaving, and he definitely had valid reasons. It doesn't mean that you're not going to miss the good times. It's like people who can't break up without being mad. Like, sometimes you can just simply say, this doesn't work. You didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. We just don't gel. And you can literally break up amicably. And so I thought, although this wasn't an amicable breakup, I thought his nostalgia was very honest and very sweet. I've left high school. I hated high school, but like that last week, I remember being like, I'm gonna miss that gym. Really gonna miss it. I hated the gym. It smelled bad and it was hot, but you just get nostalgic. So nostalgia is fine. Y'all stop being mean to him. So Harry made it clear that he did not want to shock Britons and put them into hysterics. He really didn't, but he knew by telling them the truth, they would understand his decision. But he makes it clear throughout this entire book that the people that he served, the country that he served, the queen, the monarchy, everything is still very close to his heart. And he still very much loves where he's from. He loves the people. He loves the monarchy. And he just wishes that it could have been more mutual. I thought that was a very sweet sentiment to put in there, especially considering if it had been me, I would have been like, to hell with everybody. I would have been bitter. I would have went out in a blaze of glory. Y'all probably would have chased me out of the country if I was Harry. So it's great to see that he did so in such a positive and a very sweet manner. And so at that point, they put the statement out. I literally felt my breath catch in my throat. I was just like, then what? Again, Sharion, you're in 2023. You know what happened. You can literally just Google it. You just don't get so wrapped up in the book, girl. But William put out a story in the Times right after this statement saying that he and Harry are separate and he's had his arm around his brother his entire life and he can no longer do that anymore. Sounds very big brotherly. You're such a great brother. You could have said nothing. Like that was always an option. Always an option. So Meghan returned to Canada to be with Archie, and that is when Harry is invited to a meeting at Sandringham with the Queen, Charles, and William. They waited for Meghan to leave. So here's where things get real messy. Before everyone arrives, Harry gets there early so that he can spend a little time with Granny. He sits next to her on a bench. Mind you, this is his biological grandmother. She is the queen, she is the monarch, but this is his granny. He sits by his own granny on a bench at a meeting that he was invited to, and her staff, the Wasp, had a big reaction. He reacted with alarm and ran off to go get Charles. So Charles all of a sudden shows up with the Wasp looking disheveled. See, this is why it annoys me, because yes, as far as their roles in the monarchy, it's a lot and they're having to separate and it's a lot of work and a lot of conversations. But when it comes to the family time, I just think you should know your place and there should be boundaries. And so when Harry says things like, I don't want the establishment, I want my family, I think these are the moments that he's talking about. At least that's how I take it. I can sit next to my granny. And let me tell you this, if my grandmama Lula had a staff member that wouldn't let me sit next to her, clear the room. Sometimes you just gotta clear the room. Take them out. Like, again, at this point, I've racked up so many charges. Y'all not gonna even let me in your country. But no, you can sit next to your grand. Like, come on. Should you even be in the room right now? Shouldn't we just have this family moment since I live abroad and I'm here to see my granny? Like, anyway. So William shows up later looking murderous, which is now just his face. I just decided this William being William is looking murderous. And they sat down at a conference table with the Queen at the head, and the Bee and the Wasp gave a little summary of events. And that's when Harry was given an opportunity to speak his piece to the room. He's describing the press involvement, how horrendous it's been, how it's so much worse for Meghan than any other wife, and how the family should have protected them and they wouldn't be in this place now. He's open to a lot of different options, although he would prefer option 3. He's open as long as he has security. He's very clear. He and Meghan do not want perks. They don't care about that. They want security and they want to serve the Queen, period. That's it. They're not wanting all these other things. They got that. They just want to serve the Queen and they want security. And I think that is an incredible compromise. They should have gotten a lot more out of that just by being as committed as they were. Harry fought for his country. That alone, he shouldn't have to do another thing. But that's not how they saw it. So he waited for William to back him up when it got to the conversations about the leaks in the press, because Camilla's been doing the same thing to him. And William said nothing regarding Camilla. As a matter of fact, William decided to pile onto Harry. Like,
What's wrong with you?
What do you mean what's wrong with you?
No, what's wrong with you?
No, what's wrong with you? You're projecting.
Drop it.
You drop it. You stop projecting on me. Team player.
Like, you are such a bad brother. We can handle our stuff amongst ourselves, but we're siblings. We should be able to back each other up. We all we got. And that is not what he did. But again, William is an heir, so he is going to inherit the monarchy. That's where his mind is. And he's also very selfish. Let's just be very clear. Just because he's the heir doesn't make him a bad person. He's a bad person because he seems to just be a bad person. And he's an heir. And I'm sure the two overlap in a lot of ways, but at any point up until this moment, he could have turned things around. It was always in his control to back up Harry, and he chose not to. So William decides to talk about the bullying claims that are now in that morning's paper. The press is saying that William bullied Harry and Meghan out of the family. So he's not even trying. And how can Harry fix that? But see, this is the moment where Harry is like, that sucks that they're saying that about you. But wouldn't it be even worse if I was the one who planted that about you? And so it's just like they're always stopping just short of understanding Harry's point. But like I said, they understood his point from the beginning. It just benefits them for him to maintain his place as the scapegoat, as opposed to getting the toxicity out. You know, that's always an option, but who am I? So they discussed the 5 options. The first option was maintain the status quo, everybody go back to normal, stop all this nonsense. Option number 3 was a compromise, which was very close to what Harry had initially offered, which is they live abroad, but they maintain their work for the Queen, and they maintain their security. And then option 5 was full severance of everything. Harry picked option number 3. He'd also consulted with several palace veterans about the options, and they all said option 3 was the best option. These are people who had studied the monarchy, lived in the monarchy, worked for the monarchy forever, and so they knew what was best on both sides, and they gave their honest opinion. I think that was a very good call on his behalf, is to get outside opinions, because he's in it, and sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. And it just shows that he was working from a very clear and conscious place. In none of these situations, although he does maintain like a place of being hurt, because who wouldn't, he doesn't allow his emotion to drive his decision making, which I'm sure a lot of his military training helped him with that. But he doesn't allow himself to get drawn up in the emotions when he's trying to make a decision for himself and his family. But it seems like his family is coming to the table wanting to beat him into submission. And so they're acting emotionally and abusively. He picks one of the options, but the family pushes back and is like, it's either 1 or 5. You're all in and you're going to deal with it, or it's 5 and you're out. And essentially out, from what they're kind of describing, is like, you're dead to us. So the B handed out a draft of a statement that the palace had pre-written with option 5. And that's when Harry's like, we've been talking for an hour. I picked option 3. I've said it multiple times. Yet you have a draft with option 5. Where are the drafts of the other options? Were you just prepared with any option, or did you only have option 5? The fix was in. You never prepared to have any other way. You came to the table thinking of severing ties with us, but you put on this charade. So Harry can see right through the BS, and that's what they don't like. Manipulators hate when you can call them on their nonsense. When he asks the B, were there other drafts? And the B was like, of course, there's a draft of every option depending on which one you chose or we came to agree on. And Harry's like, oh, okay, can you print those out? And he's like, oh, well, my printer is broken. Harry just busts out laughing. Again, my Virgo brother. He's like, y'all not finna play in my face. And he makes it clear, I need security. I've had 3 armed bodyguards since birth. I've earned them. I even had them when I was the most popular royal. I can't imagine why it would be considered for me to lose them now that I am the press target and it's driving so much hate. Out of all the times to not have it, now couldn't be worse. And so it's then that he even offered to pay for security himself. And it's then that they come to the conclusion that the details of this hybrid arrangement would continue to be worked through. But in the meantime, for 12 months, he would maintain his security. That's important to note because that's the note they left out on. This is where I said secret agent Harry. We've already heard his fantasy of busting in the Sandringham. So now he's there. But now he's like, I want to know about this printer. So he runs into one of the Queen's staff members who really likes Harry. And so they take him to the B's office and show him the printer. And he's like, has it ever been broken? Is it broken now? And they were like, no, it's perfect. Can I print something? And he was like, no worries. What about the one in his office though? Is that one working? And they were like, yeah, I can print you something from that one too. And he's like, no worries. I got what I needed. As he's leaving, he runs into the B. Now, the B was all big and bad in the summit. And now that he's alone and it's just him and Harry, Captain Wales, he cowers. As they're talking, the printer is going in the background. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. Being more embarrassing is like you have toilet paper on your shoe, you have a track that comes out or it's showing, or your printer is working after you just told Prince Harry that it's not. Like, he just called his bluff. And so the B says, well, don't worry about that, sir. It's really not important. Harry comes back with his Virgo sass. Isn't it? Isn't it? I love that Harry is just not taking the BS anymore. And I can't blame him. It almost got his wife killed. Like, let's not play these games. So Harry goes out into the garden to meet with William. They talk. And as they're talking again, Harry's just taking in all this scenery. And he builds this connection and saying, it's so beautiful. Can't we just live amongst this peacefully? And he's right. It doesn't have to be all this strife. It's just not necessary. And so for the first time in years, William is hearing Harry out and he's understanding where Harry is coming from. They agree to keep talking. And in some way, like, they rebuilt their alliance in this moment. At least that's kind of how Harry sees it. Like, okay, well, great. We'll keep talking. You understand where I'm coming from. I understand where you're coming from. And he even shared the intel with William about the staff that was leaking intel on Meghan. And apparently some of those same things that were happening to Harry and Meghan were also happening to Will and Kate. And Will was like, we've had our suspicions too. We'll maintain our conversation about this. So it's almost like a little bright light. But Sharion from the future, I already know that it doesn't last. So it's then that, Harry heads home. And the palace released a statement denying the bullying story about William. They denied nothing else, but they denied the one about William because he's the heir. And hi, everybody. Just cutting in here really quick, just to let you know that my podcast, Sweet Discernment, is back. It's available on iTunes, Spotify, and Anchor. Don't forget to check it out. It is my podcast, and I hope you enjoy. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Bye. It contains Harry's signature. Harry had no knowledge of this document. He didn't recognize the words, nor did he ever sign it. No bounds. Out of everything y'all talked about that day, you couldn't get around to publishing the draft of option 3, but you could publish that statement. Okay. So the fallout from this announcement about the separation was horrendous. Harry described himself staying up late into the night, just watching it all unfold. And they had very peculiar language. They used language like, we will have no mercy, expect no mercy towards Harry and Meghan, as if they'd already had any mercy to begin with. You really can't lose something you never had, but it also shows how personal they're taking this. But Harry does kind of bring up to us that the royals represent a lot of jobs. The monarchy represents a lot of jobs and a lot of money exchanging hands for people who cover it and all that stuff. So in some way, the press is protecting their jobs by coming for Harry. They know that he's going to expose them. So he also said he could feel the lies and the inaccuracies oozing into history books. And I thought that was very interesting to point out because I've made that point so many times. It's not just a personal account. This is historical fact, and it's imperative that he gets his story out there. And boy, did he give us the truth. So Harry then takes this opportunity to let us, the reader, know and declare where he stands on the monarchy. I'm going to read this. He asks the question, does the monarchy cost taxpayers? Yes. Does it also make the government a lot of money? Yes. Does the crown generate tourism income that benefits everyone? Yes. Does it also sit on lands obtained and procured when the system was unjust and wealth was generated by exploited workers and thuggery, annexation, and enslaved people? Can anyone deny it? Yes. The monarchy costs the average taxpayer the price of a pint each year. Once you tally up all of the good they do for the country, the cost of a pint, that's an incredible exchange. So his bottom line position is very clear. He will forever support the monarchy, his family, and his country. He loves his country and his family, and he always will. He just wishes that they had been there for him in his 2 most important times of need. So it's then that he brings up the fact that he had so much confidence that they would never remove his security, and they did. He kind of counters this by Prince Andrew, who was accused of SA and reportedly paid out a settlement to this person who he claimed he never met. And no one has ever brought up removing his security. So Harry was like, if they don't talk about that and removing his security, they're certainly not going to remove mine. Boy, was he wrong. When he got back to Canada, he spoke with Lloyd, his head of security, and Lloyd told him they'd been given the orders to remove themselves from Harry's property in March of that year. Lloyd also acknowledged that Harry and his family were at greater risk than any other royal. And when Harry called Charles to get this clear, wouldn't answer. Harry called William, expecting him to step up, but William was basically like, it happened through government, can't help. And so they had just had this really great moment at Sandringham, and they're supposed to be on the same side, and it's kind of like rebuilding their bond, only for William to be like, well, I mean, that's how it go. It's insane to me. So Lloyd pleaded with his superiors and like begged, like, we have to do something. They're under so much risk. And his superiors stonewalled him. Harry scrambled to find security. Now, when he talked about, I felt for him in this moment, but I know they're fine now. So when I read this part, when he said one quote was $6 million a year, he said, I slowly hung up the phone. It made me think about all those times where I'm on Uber Eats and I'm like, okay, good, this is only $15. And then by the time you get to the bottom, it's like 78. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. So, yeah, I have a lot of little abandoned carts because no, y'all are not going to hit me with fee after fee after fee. We're not doing that. We're not playing that game. And I understand you, Harry, on my own level. So I don't care if it's $75 or $6 million. Don't play about my money. But the press is still having a field day. The abuse is relentless. And finally, a shift. So the pandemic hit. It's hard on everyone. And that's when Canada is discussing closing their borders. Harry and Meghan are concerned. They're losing security. They don't know where they're going to move to because, you know, the paparazzi know where they are. It's just a lot. And so they're talking to Tyler Perry, and he recognizes like how much stress they're under, and he offers them their house and he pays for security. So they board the Freedom flight and they get to Tyler Perry's house. They love it. Archie took his first steps in Tyler Perry's garden. They have all these amazing things in the house, and one of which Harry talks about how Archie runs up to this amazing painting that he was just fixated on. And when Meghan took a closer look, the nameplate was Goddess of the Hunt, Diana. And so Harry is talking to Tyler Perry, and he was like, I didn't even remember that painting was there. That's so eerie. And all of them got chills. And so they were able to regroup. Just as they were getting comfortable and feeling safe, paparazzi found them at Tyler Perry's house again, 6 weeks to the day. They had to hunker down again, close the shades, like they couldn't use the premises at all. In addition to cutting his security, Charles is now cutting Harry's income, like he's cutting him off financially. And Harry acknowledges, like, this may sound weird, but just keep in mind, I was born a royal. I've never been taught to be independent. I've never had a house key, never had pocket change, as he put, never got a box from Amazon. Like, he's just never had all these small little liberties, and he's having to learn all this, in addition to the fact that he doesn't just sit on daddy's money. His dad is his employer, and he is being paid for his service to the queen, and he's given a lifetime of service. So the fact that he was cut off was just shocking. And people like to basically say like, oh, Harry's lazy, but he definitely points out how systematically he was infantilized and he was never taught to be, or as he put it, prohibited to be from being independent, nor was he ever allowed to be hireable. And so they basically rendered him helpless. And as he said, he was raised for slaughter. So they talk about how they're going to pay for their new home and how they're going to pay for security. And they consider the inheritance from Diana, but he definitely wants to use that as a last resort because he wants that to be for Archie. And it's then that he drops on us that Meghan is pregnant again. And he gives these pregnancy reveals like Love and Hip Hop.
I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant.
You're pregnant.
By the way, I'm pregnant.
How they'll always just pop up with I'm pregnant, like they just drop it in the middle of a scene. Harry is good for like a good, like, wait, what did you just say? So yes, this is when Meghan was pregnant for the second time. So they found their house, they get moved in, and Harry points out to us how Meghan is still very much stressed. She is still fighting the mail. They are now targeting her friends who worked with People magazine to post an anonymous story about Meghan and basically showing her for the human that she is and all the bright spots about her, because the press was putting out those very false narratives. And they know that if they publish those names, that those people's lives will essentially be over because the press will also target these normal citizens. And so Meghan is fighting very hard for that to not happen, and she's really trying to protect her friends, and the stress gets to her. The first day in their new home, she miscarries their baby, and they bury the baby under the banyan tree. It's a very sad segment. And it's just, again, I said this section is filled with so much loss. He then catches us up for Christmas. Now, this is a bright spot in part 3. They signed several corporate sponsorships. They can now get back to work, and they're paying for security. They got their house. They're recovering from the tragedy that just happened. And so they celebrate Christmas, and Meghan gives Harry a special ornament that she found in town, and it's got Queen Elizabeth on it. And he loves it, and so he puts it on the tree, and while he and Archie are playing, he accidentally drops it and breaks it. Archie runs over with a water bottle and tries to spray it with the water to fix it. And I'm sure that would have worked. Of course, they told Archie not to, because they didn't want him to get on it, I'm sure. And so Meghan goes, no, you can't spray Granny. You can't spray Gran. And I'm just like, I'm sure that would have worked. Y'all were hating on little Archie. He knew what to do. But that's going to come back later. So hold that thought. The palace abuse continues. And they strip Harry of his titles that he earned in the military. They refuse to lay a wreath for him and on Remembrance Day. And thankfully, an instructor of his, an old instructor of his, agreed to do so and definitely stated his words of alignment for Harry and support. They also released a statement when they stripped Harry's titles of like, they will no longer work on behalf of the Queen and blah, blah, blah. And they made it almost sound like, one, the statement was from them both, but also extremely callous. Harry and Meghan released their own statement to confirm that they were still committed to a life of service. Harry meets a medium. He goes to this medium after being recommended to do so by a friend. And he's kind of skeptical and he's trying not to buy in all at once, but it felt very accurate to him. She tells him, your mother knows you're looking for clarity. She feels your confusion, and she knows that you have so many questions. The answers will come in time, one day in the future. But in the meantime, she was very proud, and she knew it wasn't easy. You're living the life she couldn't, and you're living the life she wanted for you. So he wants to believe this, but he's like, I need a sign, I need proof. And so the medium said, your mother says the ornament, she was there, something about a Christmas ornament of a mother or a grandmother. It fell and broke. Archie tried to fix it, and she had a little bit of a giggle about that. So no, I'm not creeped out. You're creeped out. So that part actually affirmed for me, like when he cried at the Well Child, well, he choked up at the Well Child Awards, how Diana's friend touched his back. We learned through the Oprah interview that Diana's friends reached out to Meghan to offer her solace. Diana is very present in his life. She is very much still very active. And so when both he and William acknowledged, like, I think mom is helping us set our lives up, I believe so. I 100% see why they say that. And I can see like the little breadcrumbs to that conclusion. So now we get to the full circle moment after Prince Philip's funeral. Harry, Charles, and William are taking their walk, and the conversation is pretty bleak, but Harry again restates his point because they're acting like they don't know why he left, and they're almost behaving in a delusional manner. That will drive you crazy. If people, you know, they know and they're acting dumb, and that gaslighting, that will literally make you crazy. And so Harry is sticking to his guns. He's like, this shouldn't be happening to me. Points out that the press has a very heavy hand in the dissolution of their relationships and what he's actually fighting for when it comes to the press. He's exposing the abuse, and Prince Charles is like, it's a suicide mission. It's now that Harry recognizes, like, my dad needs the validation. He's obsessed with it, and it's because he was bullied as a child. He didn't feel loved, and so now this is how he gets his affirmation. But again, like I said, you can acknowledge why someone is the way they are without permitting their toxic behavior. Two things can be true. I know why you are like this, and I have empathy, but you also should not continue to perpetuate this kind of abuse towards me. Two things can be true. And so I'm glad that he continues to kind of hold his family accountable, acknowledging, and himself too, like he is not above reproach at all. And I love that about him. He is very human, and he continues to admit even when he was wrong in situations. And so I love that he holds his dad accountable in this way and basically says, yes, you were, bullied, but, and you needed love, but that doesn't mean that the press should have at it with your kids. So Harry acknowledged that he was having trouble forgiving them for collaborating and enabling the press to abuse him the way they were, as well as their complicit silence, because now there's bullying claims. Right before the Oprah interview, there were bullying claims that mysteriously popped up. And so he acknowledges in this moment as well that I sent in a 25-page report. My wife and I sent in a 25-page report with evidence dispelling all of the bullying allegations. So Charles and William call Harry delusional. He also said that they were very upset about the Oprah interview, and many of his friends were also very upset with Harry about that. And it was, again, because they were lying on him and his wife, and these lies were culminating in violent threats and actions towards them from random people. And this is also historical. It's important to get your point out. Also was very frustrated with the fact that people lambasted him for doing the Oprah interview. Meanwhile, they had no problem with the royal family and their leaks, except his was very much upfront. You see it coming out of my mouth. You know what I said, and I'm not hiding behind anyone. Anyway, William began shouting at Harry. He grabbed Harry twice. He lunged at Harry and grabbed him by the shirt, made him look at him in the face. He's being very abusive while also saying, you know I love you and I care about you. I swear on mommy's life. And so not only does that stop everybody cold, just because that's he hasn't said that in so long, and it's also a very bold declaration, but also because Harry is not buying into it. He's not putting up with it. He's no longer letting them abuse him. And he just walks away. He leaves them mad in the garden. Like, just angry people, angry birds just in the garden. And he just walks away. Had enough. He walked away and he said, enough death. When will someone break free? So now we get the story of Lily. Lily is born into a very happy and peaceful experience. They're not on the clock. They're not being timed. They're not having to hide. Unfortunately, there was no laughing gas, but it was a very calm and loving birth. And Harry was committed to catching Lily because he wanted her to see his face first. And they did skin to skin, and it was very beautiful. She did skin to skin with Meghan, and Meghan jots down her thoughts about the moment. She was just so overcome with the moment. She journaled her thoughts and she read them to Harry almost as a love poem and, as he said, a decree. And one of the things that she said to him was, I've never loved you more than this moment. You are a man, not a spare. And I thought that was a very sweet note. So he talks about a time when he took Meghan to meet Diana to her site at Althorpe. And, it was then that Meghan connected and she prayed for clarity and guidance. And then we have to say goodbye to the Queen. He walks us through how when they were on a work trip, they were on that tour when the Queen passed away. So right before the Queen dies at Balmoral, Charles calls and invites Harry. And he's like, you don't need to bring her. And Harry puts him in his place.
Then came another call from Pa. He said I was welcome at Balmoral, but he didn't want her disrespectful, and I wasn't having it. Don't ever speak about my wife that way. No other wives were coming. Kate wasn't coming, he said. Therefore, Meg shouldn't. And that's all you needed to say.
And I was glad to see this because at this point, we see the final core is revealed. All the layers have been pulled back. He is no longer seeing his family through idealistic eyes. He is now seeing them for who they are. And the moment they disrespect his wife, he is on it. He is not playing. That's why I said in the beginning when William disrespected Meghan by pointing at her and she defended herself, I was like, I would have loved to know what happened right after that. I didn't say Harry didn't defend her. I said my expectation is that as a husband you would. And since we don't know what he did, I was very curious to know what was said. What did he say? But I'm glad to know for sure what happened here because Charles definitely overstepped and disrespected Meghan, and Harry was right there saying that's all you had to say. If none of the other wives were going, then that's how you should have said it, period. And he was 100% right. You don't disrespect. See, people will try to disrespect you or your spouse in little subtle ways to see what they can get away with. Don't let up on them. So while he's en route, the Queen does pass away. He goes to Balmoral, but before he gets there, he texts William, like, how are you getting to Balmoral? How are you and Kate getting there? William ignores him. So he has to get his own accommodations there. And when he gets there, his family is not really present, but Princess Anne welcomes him and he spends those last moments with the Queen. He has dinner with his family. Charles and William and Kate and Camilla are not there. It's basically like they cut him off. Even on the way home from Balmoral, he didn't travel with them. He traveled alone on British Airways. And he said the people that boarded saw him and were like, I'm so sorry for your loss. Again, just Harry connecting with the people. And so when he gets home, A hummingbird gets into the house, and he talks about how a hummingbird is represents like a resurrected soul or a warrior, and how when he lets it out of the house, he sets it free and it flies away. And he felt like it was like a nice symbol after the death of his grandmother that she was finally free. But here's something I wanted to note. There were so many parallels that were drawn here in Spare with the Odyssey. Did y'all notice that? So the Odyssey is a poem. It's broken up to like 24 books, and it follows Odysseus, and he's at the Trojan War, and it follows his journey home. And so when he's on his way home, the main theme of the book is like the homecoming. That's like a really big point in the poems. But also the other themes were like wandering, testing, and omens. Like people are getting tested. There are multiple omens, and there's a lot of wandering. Harry describes himself as wandering a lot. So if you notice, anytime he gets into like a peaceful state, like a peaceful place, when he first got to Vancouver, when he first got to the house in Scotland with his dad, when he first got to Tyler Perry's house, when he got to his new home, he always wanders the grounds. And I found that to be interesting because when they found out the Queen died, he described their trip turning into an odyssey. And then throughout the book, he often describes himself as wandering. He often describes himself as being tested in different ways. And also omens. He said that there were a few things in the book that looked like positive omens like the seals, but also negative omens. We also see other positive omens such as the ornament. We also see, the ornament, we see the hummingbird, we see the picture in Tyler Perry's house. Like there's all these positive signs, the medium, but also negative omens as well, like the story about the seals. So I thought that was a really cool parallel between the Odyssey and Spare, and I would like to explore that more. So I may just dig into that on my podcast. I don't know. But what did you think of the conclusion of Spare? I thought it ended beautifully. I also like the little music they chose at the end. It felt like a Lifetime movie. So this is a really good book. I thought it was fantastic. It was very touching. It was way more honest than I thought it would be. And I think,
are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is that why you are here?
I think one of my like hidden gems of this book is the fact that ever so often Harry will share like a fantasy he's having. Like in my mind, I imagine XYZ, and his fantasies are wild and outrageous. They're so funny. I'm glad he included that. Like he is a very free person in this book. Like he's humorous. He's telling details, the truth. He's sharing his innermost, deepest thoughts. Like he's very forthcoming with his story, and he's very respectful of how he's talking about his family. So many people expected honesty to equal salaciousness, and it doesn't. He gives accurate details. He shares his innermost thoughts. He also shares details of when he does things wrong. One of my favorite parts about how he writes the story is that he is not above reproach. So many people want to be extreme one way or the other. Everything Harry does is right. Everything Harry does is wrong. And it's very dangerous to get into any of those states. You should never be extreme about anybody. You shouldn't just immediately say right, wrong, and apply it to a person because people are nuanced. One of the things I love about this story is that Harry is very honest. He makes mistakes, but I love that the story documents his growth. And it also makes sense how the book ends, that he wrote the book, the way he wrote the book in the beginning. It makes so much sense how, again, idealistic he is in the beginning, and over time you just see him tolerating less, standing up for himself and others, and putting his foot down. You do see him evolve from this spare character to a grown man with a full life ahead of him, and happy memories to make and happy memories acquired already. So I'm interested in your thoughts. What do you think of the conclusion of Spare? I'm so sad to be done reading it, but if you guys want me to read another book and document it here, I'll do that one video a week where I document a book. So feel free to let me know. I would prefer that it's royal related, but let me know. So thank you so much for watching and following this entire recap. This has been 6 or 7 videos, so I really appreciate your patience. I've had such a good time recapping this book. It delivered. I was so excited for it. I anticipated it being amazing, and I was not let down, and it exceeded my expectations, which were already very high. But I appreciate you watching my channel, subscribing, watching, and listening and interacting. But I want to hear from you. Leave in the comment section what was your favorite part about this book and what part shocked you the most. Those are the 2 things I have to know, because I'm going to read every last one. What's your favorite part about the book and what part shocked you the most? I can't wait. Anyway, if you have not already, please feel free to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Oh.